Before the Bronze Age, before the chisel shaped the first stone idol, there was only the hammer of the north wind and the anvil of the desolate plain. This world owes you nothing. It is a grinding wheel that separates the iron from the dust. Men speak of rights granted by soft kings, of equality measured out like wine to thirsty beggars. They weave these pleasant lies beneath roofs of slate and silk. But step out beneath the stars. Listen to the howl of the wolf and the creak of the hanging rope. The wild truth remains. Equality is the greatest shackle forged by the weak, meant to bind those whose shadows are longer. The civilized dream of a world where every harvest is guaranteed, where every man stands as tall as the next. They call it justice. I call it the lullaby of the doom-bound. I have smelled the fear on their breath, the manufactured pity they use to cloak their own lack of spine. A man is worth the weight of his resolve, nothing more. Step inside the walls of Zamora or walk the polished marble halls of Aquilonia. This is where the great deception takes hold. These empires are monuments not to power, but to fear. Massive shields erected against the glorious, untamed chaos outside. Inside, men breed like animals in a protected pen, exchanging the sharpness of their instincts for the dull certainty of 3 meals a day. They have domesticated themselves, becoming reliant on systems, on the complex, fragile framework of law and bureaucracy that guarantees their continued breathing. They believe their equality springs from decree. They mistake uniform comfort for universal worth. Watch them in the public squares. The scholar, frail and stooped, argues eloquently for his right to the same respect and resource as the veteran warrior, scarred and hardened, who held the gates against the Picts. They are placed side by the state, declared identical units in the ledger. But only one of them knows the weight of true consequence. Only one understands that the value of a thing is measured only when it is tested against cold iron and sudden death. The civilized man fears suffering more than he cherishes freedom, and so he builds his gilded cage, calling it society. I saw this lie manifest in the media. I was dragged before a magistrate, a fat, soft thing draped in purple silk, whose hands had never gripped anything heavier than a pen. He spoke of universal justice, of the scale that weighs all men equally. It was a formal spectacle of delusion. Beside him stood a guard, tall and rigid, who hated the magistrate, but feared the chain of command more. The magistrate had the power of law. The guard had the power of brute force, held in check only by the flimsy threat of legal retribution. Then the riot started. A sudden surge of discontent from the market district, a flash of steel and fire in the heart of the city's veneer. The doors of the courthouse were battered by a mob, screaming not for justice, but for plunder. The fat magistrate, seconds before dictating the fate of men, collapsed into a whimpering heap beneath his desk. His universal laws vanished with the first splintering sound of the oak door. He ceased being a symbol of state power and reverted to his primal core, a frightened animal, useless and exposed. The guard, however, drew his steel. His true inherent value, his ability to kill or defend, returned to the forefront. The magistrate screamed, invoking the laws he championed, demanding the guard protect him based on the principle of equal citizenry. This was the core resistance, the great brittle delusion of the pampered class. They truly believe their constructed rules hold substance when the structure itself is burning. They cling to the idea that declared status can somehow override fundamental physical reality. They argue that the promise of protection is equivalent to the skill to provide it. But the guard, sensing the shift from order to chaos, felt the magnetic pull of true hierarchy. He looked at the sniveling official, then at the mob outside baying for blood. He knew instinctively that the only thing separating him from the fate of the magistrate was the sharpness of his edge and the swiftness of his arm. The laws, the paperwork, the grand speeches, these were all air. In that moment of genuine crisis, the lie of false equality was not debated. It was crushed beneath the reality of superior physical and mental capability. The guard hesitated not out of malice, but pure calculation. The civilized man's desperate plea for fairness was the howl of a trapped mouse. The guard, whose name was Torvus, did not wait for the decree of the collapsing state. He acted, not for the magistrate, but for the instinct of self-preservation and the grim satisfaction of using his earned skill. He did not appeal to the rights of the state. He appealed to the brutal efficiency of the two-handed axe strapped to his back. He moved with a speed born of years spent training in the bleak northern forts, a movement that transcended mere physical strength, fueled by an unflinching acceptance of necessary violence. The crowd burst through the doorway, their faces masks of greed and rage. Torvus met them, a pillar of iron against water. He did not engage in diplomacy. He engaged in immediate, final severance. Each swing was a philosophical statement, a rebuttal to the magistrate's plea for abstract justice. The axe measured worth in slices, determining who stood and who fell based purely on capability, resolve, and speed. The magistrate's gold was useless. His titles were worthless. Only Torvus's steel held currency in that chamber of death. This is the ultimate method, reducing every complex social contract to the simple, unforgiving algebra of the sword. When the dust settled, or rather when the blood stopped misting the air, the magistrate crawled out trembling, now staring at Torvus not as an equal citizen, but as a demigod of necessary violence. That was the first revelation, the utter impotence of declared authority when confronted by earned skill. The magistrate's rights evaporated. Torvus's survival remained. The concept of equal value died instantly, replaced by the grim hierarchy carved by the axe. The magistrate thanked Torvus, promising rewards, citing laws of gratitude and service. He tried to reimpose the fragile system, but Torvus merely looked at the dead on the floor. He saw the true currency of the world scattered amongst the shattered furniture and spilled wine. He saw that the life he had saved was utterly dependent on him, not on the parchment and ink the magistrate so revered. The law had not saved the magistrate. The man Torvus had saved him. The distinction was absolute. The soft man's life was an extension of the hard man's strength. His survival was not an inherent right. It was a temporary, revocable gift from the steel wielder. Consider the structure of a wolf pack versus the structure of a human city. The wolf pack operates on brutal honesty. The alpha eats first because he earned the kill. His dominance is constantly tested by fangs and muscle. It is meritocracy forged in hunger and cold. If the alpha weakens, he falls, and the pack thrives because weakness is purged. The city, however, operates on a complex chemical dependency, a slow, sweet poison. It protects the weak, not out of charity, but to ensure a docile workforce. This illusion of equality is merely socialized risk transfer. The man who refuses to train his body or harden his mind demands that the warrior shield him, and the law mandates it. This is like demanding that a lead weight float like a cedar plank simply because the state declared them equal in the water. The physics of life, the inescapable laws of survival, do not recognize human decrees. You cannot legislate competence. When the walls fall, the soft leaden citizen drowns, dragging down the cedar plank with his manufactured dependence. The soft man's demand for equality is not a noble pursuit of fairness. It is the whining request for protection from the consequences of his own atrophy. This incident changed everything for the magistrate, though he would never admit it openly. He continued to wear his purple robes and cite his laws, but the marble floor of his office now held the undeniable memory of blood. He knew, deep in the pit of his gut, that his life was borrowed. He knew that the system he glorified was a paper fortress, constantly reinforced by the silent, resentful violence of men like Torvus. The city, once a symbol of his authority, became a symbol of his absolute reliance on others. The great consequence of embracing the lie of false equality is the erosion of personal accountability. If everyone is equally valuable, why strive? If the state promises to catch you, why bother learning to climb? Men become soft, complacent. They delegate their existence, their security, their sustenance, their very dignity to the faceless machine of government. When that machine inevitably sputters and dies, the civilized man is left utterly naked, incapable of earning his own bread or defending his own gate. The true horror is not the collapse itself, but the utter incompetence revealed in those who were sheltered by the lie. They do not merely starve, they whine as they die. But the deeper mystery remains. Torvus, the guard, stayed. Why did the man of steel continue to serve the man of silk even after the truth was laid bare in blood? The answer is the second great challenge of the barbarian's philosophy. If the weak are useless, why protect them? If hierarchy is determined by force, why participate in the fragile order? The great king knows this dilemma. He understands that absolute freedom, the Cimmerian way, often leads to isolation and constant struggle. The civilized world offers a cold bargain. Surrender some measure of your strength and freedom, and in return gain stability and a greater collective power. The guard stays because, although he despises the magistrate's weakness, he understands the utility of the system. The magistrate, though useless in combat, organizes the logistics of war, the mining of iron, the storage of grain. The weak, when unified, can overwhelm the strong, purely through volume and resource control. The weak trade their freedom for safety, and the strong trade their absolute sovereignty for control of the gathered resource. It is a necessary evil, a chilling compromise between the wolf and the shepherd. Look beyond the palace walls, past the farms and the domesticated fields. The true image of the world is the mountain range, indifferent to human pleas. Nature practices no equality. The lion does not debate the right of the gazelle to exist. The winter storm does not promise warmth to the unprepared farmer. The natural order is a cold, clear accounting. Survival is the dividend of effort and adaptation. Death is the cost of failure. Civilization attempts to smooth out these sharp edges, to distribute the burden of failure across the backs of the competent. But the law of the jungle always waits at the periphery. It is the inescapable truth underlying all human endeavor. The softest, most gilded city still requires the harsh, unsentimental eye of the guard, the ruthless efficiency of the merchant, and the unyielding will of the king. Every moment of comfort in the city is paid for by a corresponding measure of cruelty and hard-won expertise exerted outside the walls. The equal citizen inside the walls is merely a passenger, relying on the hierarchical competence of the pilot, the mechanic, and the security chief. The greater image is that the weak survive only through the grace of the strong, and the strong accept the burden only when the reward outweighs the disgust. Centuries from now, the Nemedia courthouse will be a ruin, the marble cracked by frost, the purple robes nothing but dust. The names of the magistrates and their intricate laws will be forgotten, buried beneath the weeds. What will remain? The ruins of the wall that Torvus defended, a silent, enduring testament to the necessity of his strength. The legacy of the civilized is always ruin, because their foundations are built on convenient, palatable lies. They build soft things that cannot withstand the wind. The true legacy of the barbarian and the philosophy of the unforgiving natural world is simple resilience. It is the ability to stand alone when the structure collapses, to find warmth in the cold, and to impose order not through parchment, but through presence. The only things that truly survive the ages are the things that earn their right to endure, the stone that stands against the flood, the steel that does not rust, and the man whose value is inherent in his capability, not bestowed by the crown. When you rely on something external, a law, a government, a declaration, that thing becomes your master. The civilized man leaves behind a pampered memory. The strong man leaves behind an enduring shadow of competence. So shed the velvet cloak of easy lies. Cease demanding that the world conform to your soft ideals of fairness. Look at the true scale. Your worth is not determined by the king's decree, nor by the clamor of the mob, but by the cold, silent verdict of the battlefield, be it a literal war or the daily struggle against entropy and want. Stop believing the soothing fiction that everyone deserves the same reward, because not everyone is willing to pay the same price in sweat, focus, and suffering. There is no pity in the wind. There is no equality in the grave. There is only the earned moment of survival, the superiority of the prepared mind, and the mastery of the sharpened skill. If you seek to be judged equal to the wolf, you must first prove you possess the fangs. If you choose dependence, you choose weakness, and weakness is death, delayed only by the efforts of the men you secretly despise. Go out now. Test your edges. What is the steel you carry, and what is the burden you bear? Do not answer the question to me. Answer it to the shadows. If you are strong, you know this truth already. If you are weak, you will spend your life arguing against it, right up until the point the structure fails.